Alright guys, today we got a 6-liter LS that came in for low oil pressure.
This truck only had 5 psi of oil pressure at 600 RPM. You see that right there? That's a brand new high volume oil pump that we just got done installing. After putting the new oil pump on, it still had low oil pressure. So we took it all back apart and let me show you what we found. You see that? That's the cam bearing starting to walk out of the block. You see how it's all chewed up? That's because it's been making contact with the bottom of the lifter. That is not good. So right now I'm in the process of removing the camshaft, and look at here, the cam bearing completely fell out of the cam journal. All right, we got the cam out. If you look here where the cam rides on that bearing, it's pretty rough, so this thing's gonna get a new cam as well. And look at the side of that cam bearing. That's where the lifter was coming down, making contact, which mushroomed it over really bad. So the reason that failed cam bearing caused low oil pressure is because these cam bearings are lubricated through a hole in the center of the bearing that lines up with an oil galley in the block. If the bearing starts to walk out of the block, eventually that oil galley will be uncovered off the side of the bearing, causing an unrestricted stream of oil to be dumped back into the oil pan, causing a massive pressure loss.
Alright, it's time to get these cam bearings changed out with my new Bonafide Tools hydraulic cam bearing installer. Here I'm removing the rearmost cam bearing. This tool uses very precisely sized machined aluminum pucks to drive the bearings, which makes removal and installation of the bearings a breeze.
Wow. Oh, what an idiot. Pushed it right into the cam position sensor. Alright, before I put the new cam bearings in, I just want to show you they have been updated from this original split style design to what they call a full round bearing. This is a one-piece construction, and it also has this new black coating on the inside that helps to reduce friction, but these new bearings are far superior than the ones that originally came in this motor. And if you look closely, you'll see the markings that are only found on parts of the absolute highest quality, and that's those 3 letters, USA. So before I press these new bearings into the block, I'm going to be lining up the oil hole in the bearing with the oil galley in the journal. Then I'm taking a Sharpie and making a mark at 12 o'clock. This is going to help me position the bearings correctly, especially those bearings that are deep down inside the block that you can't see very well. So this is what the hydraulic cam bearing installer looks like, in place and ready to go. And there's the new bearing being pressed into place with the Sharpie mark at 12 o'clock. So here I'm just using a borescope to confirm that the oil hole in the bearing is lined up with the oil galley, which it is. So the final step of this cam bearing installation is going to be pulling what they call a ball broach through the cam bearings. A ball broach is a very precisely sized spherical steel puck that when pulled through the bearing helps to eliminate any high spots and make the bearing perfectly round and smooth. So after adding a little oil to the bearings and the broach, we're going to be pushing it through from one end all the way to the other. Now this broach pushes through pretty easily. I did not have to use the hydraulics. It actually just by hand I was able to thread in that little coupler and force its way through each of the bearings. And that's all there is to it. All 5 cam bearings installed and ready to go. Sheesh! Alright, it's time to install the new camshaft. Now I know a lot of people have had issues after installing new cam bearings in an LS with the cam not wanting to go in, or if it does go in, it's really hard to turn, and that's because the bearings are either out of alignment or they have some type of high spot in the bearing. Now this cam just drops in very easily and spins very easily as well, but I think our success can be attributed to the use of those ball broaches through the bearings. So here I just wanted to show you how I can easily spin the cam with one finger. I can also spin the cam with a Q-tip, and as you know, those aren't very strong.
Now here's a little tip for you. Anytime you have low oil pressure on an LS, it's important to know that this seal on the back of the cam retainer plate could be the issue. Behind the cam retainer plate, you see these 2 main oil galleys that supply oil to the lifters. When this seal doesn't seal, you have pressurized oil that leaks past and dumps into the crankcase, causing a loss of oil pressure. We had already replaced this cam retainer plate when we did the oil pump. However, it did not increase oil pressure, but that's something to remember and keep in mind. And anytime you have the camshaft out, you should always change this plate. It's also highly recommended anytime you have the rear cover off the engine to replace what they call the barbell restrictor. This restrictor fits into the main oil galley in the back of the block and diverts oil into the oil filter. It's sealed to the back of the block with this one O-ring. If that O-ring leaks, you have pressurized oil just squirting right back into the oil pan, causing a massive pressure loss. So here's another little tip for you. LS engines don't have any dowel pins to locate the oil pump onto the engine block. But to get peak efficiency and maximum life out of your oil pump, it's recommended to center this outer ring gear inside the housing of the oil pump. And we do that using 4 3/1000 inch feeler gauges located around the outside of that outer ring gear. This is going to perfectly center the oil pump before we tighten the bolts down.
Oh, and one more thing. Because we're running a high volume oil pump on this engine, we're going to be using the high capacity oil filter on the right. That's because with more oil volume comes more pressure drop across the filter media inside the oil filter. And the higher that pressure drop, the more chance you have of the oil filter bypass valve opening and sending unfiltered oil into the engine. So if we increase the surface area of filter media inside the oil filter, this is going to reduce pressure drop and keep that bypass valve closed more often. And here's the final results. At 600 RPM idle speed, we now have 40 PSI of oil pressure. This is a massive increase from the 5 PSI that it had before.